Ladies and gentlemen, it says we're alive now for 4 seconds on the air with Matt Powers. How the heck are you, Matt?
I am amazing. This entire month has gone by in a blink, it feels like, and it's every day has been more and more exciting, and breakthroughs. And I am amazing. This entire month has gone by in a blink, it feels like.
Do you have something on?
Has been more and more exciting. Oh yeah, I have it over here.
Turn off YouTube. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Go ahead.
I was checking to make sure that we were on at this time. We're in different time zones, so it's
no, we're live. We're streaming live.
Hey everybody. So yeah, I mean, it just has been absolutely incredible. The support from the community, the excitement, the enthusiasm, and then the breakthroughs and the insights, and it's been a thrill, an absolute thrill. So I'm excited to be here again with you.
Yeah. Well, and look, the Kickstarter is exploding. It's gone up about $4,000 in the last, maybe let's say 6 hours, which is good news. There's only 35 hours to go, which is just a little bit more than a day. So it probably ends tomorrow night at midnight. Does that make sense? Tomorrow night, Saturday midnight-ish here?
Actually, I did it so weirdly. My apologies. It ends at your 7 a.m. Sunday morning.
Wow.
Totally. What happened was there was a weird delay with their approval process. And so then it took them an extra long time to approve it. And I had already planned all these webinars because all the other 7 other ones were easily scheduled. So it's a weird time. So essentially tomorrow is the last day for us in North America.
Now, Matt, the chat that we can you see the chat live in the StreamYard studio?
Yes, I can.
That's the YouTube chat. So what we're going to do here is I got to run out and close a few greenhouses. Just going to take about 5 minutes. I'm going to put Matt on solo and we'll just open up the questions and answers because we're going to be on at least an hour to explain anything to have to do if you got involved with regenerative soil microscopy, if you got involved with the Kickstarter, if you just have questions for Matt about anything, Matt will do it, and I'll be back because we're going to have more people coming in as we go, and we'll see how it works out. So just let me shut out the greenhouses. Here is Matt Powers with a very successful. Right now we're at about 150%.
It's 244%.
Or 250. That's what I was saying.
Counting.
Yeah, 244. All right, so here's Matt Powers for your questions and answers.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. What regenerative soil microscopy or regenerative soil questions do you have? Because that's what I love talking about. That's what I love digging into with people, and solving the problems that are in our soil is the linchpin to all other problems. And so whether your orchard's having issues and diseases, or pests are coming in, or the fruits are small, or they're not coming in like you like, and then the quality, the nutritional density of all of our food. The food should be medicine. All of these things come from the soil, and they start in the soil, and all of those problems can be treated in the soil. So that's why it's so important that we have a database that allows us to look across our bioregions to see how our tests compare to others. And this database is going to be an open and free database that everyone can participate in. And there's going to be a membership level that has tools. So if you're doing the microscopy work, all the nitty-gritty kind of stuff where you're counting and you're calculating, that kind of stuff it can be automated. And so it makes for someone doing this kind of work indispensable. So, and then for all of us who are gardeners and who want the deep insights into our soil so that we can make the best food. And at times like these, when we're getting food from so many other places, it doesn't make any sense. We have lost our local food infrastructure, our local farmers markets. Sometimes they're there, but they're competing over the tomatoes, right? Or the staple foods. It's like we need to have bioregional local foods that are nutritionally dense, and also they can be grown in such abundance that we can export to our and trade with with other people and have enough food locally. And so we don't need to necessarily bring in food necessarily unless it's just for like variety. That's the cool thing though. When we do this, all of the heirlooms, remember heirlooms? They're the seeds that have the names attached to them. This like the town name, and then the peach, the county name, and then the apple. Like that bioregionalization is how we specialized initially. It was the best of the best of that bioregion. And then they made all their apple pies with it. And then everyone was like, this is the greatest apple, right? And it was the pride of their area. That kind of economy is missing. And it's the backbone for every community. And so times get rough. We've got our own food. We can provide for ourselves. It's also the seasonal celebration. When I grew up in New England, and you all know, anyone who's been to New England in fall, the cider presses are out. There's that smell, the cider tastes a certain way that it's indescribable, and it's part of you. It's part of your blood. It's like the same thing with like the maple syrup, you know what I mean? When the trees are running and you can drink the syrup before it's like condensed and it's just like sap, but it's like, there's all these local, unbelievable tie-ins to the natural world that we're missing. And I've named just like a few, because New England, where I grew up, but every bioregion has dozens upon dozens upon dozens, and we can fill, an abundance. We can fill out our diets with the abundance of all local bioregions, especially if we fix the soil. And that's actually the reason we don't have these things happening everywhere, is that people are stuck on the soil. The organic movement was like an abstinence movement. They're like, I simply will not use these things. And then they're like, didn't improve it. And some of them improved their soil, and they were the forerunners to regenerative ag. But a lot of them were just like, I will not do things. And, and then they'd kill their soil, and it was nuts. So we're in a new day and a new era. And hey, you got those greenhouses closed.
Yeah, we're back, baby.
But yeah. So regenerative soil, the testing, if we don't look, we don't see. And if we don't see, we actually can't have an understanding of what to do. And that's what's so powerful about this whole project that I'm doing. We're not just doing because the microscope is the linchpin between all the different disciplines. One of the things that was so awesome, talking to Diamond was to like learn more about polarized lenses, which is a geologist's perspective on the microscope. And so the microscope is this linchpin between all the disciplines. And so, and yes, by making your one microscope turn into 4 or even 5 different types of microscopes, and this is very easy to do, you actually can see things from so many different angles, and you develop a holistic understanding of the way things are cycling nutrient-wise, how the fungi is potentially everywhere, but it might not be. I mean, if you inoculated it and it didn't take, it's like you can instantly read that with a microscope.
Yeah,
and you can't do that any other way.
The new light field is spectacular. I mean, so if you look at the top of this visual that we have here, what you can learn by getting involved with this Kickstarter is the original way that you looked at a slide. If you want to look at a root or a plant or something, is through bright field, where you're shining the light from below up and through the sample. But the new light field technique on the right is when you illuminate from above and down through it, so you can look at the surface. Now, it also appears to change the color, and that's because of the different types of light field that you can use. Now, what's the difference?
Well, it's actually the same natural light, and I'm going to try to use different bulbs to see which is, you know what I mean? Because I mean, that light field right there is with an LED light on it, and that's why it has that more flat bluish light to it. I'm going to use a more natural light. I actually got my nightclub flashlight from when I was a kid and used to work nightclubs in New York City. Because you know what it is when you're walking through it. That you can literally blast someone in the eyes with that in a nightclub and carry them away because it's so dark in there. It's like a deer in headlight. Anyway, so the brighter I'm working with different lights to actually see things from a different angle, and I don't want to overdo the light. I lived with a photography major at NYU for 4 years, and he was old fashioned. He had an accordion camera, and he had the block and back that you would flip and you get 2 pictures. But I learned a lot about light and shadow. And I realized if you look on the bright field right here, that's a light that is blasting up towards your eye.
Yeah.
Now, if we did that to the root on the right, it would make the root just a silhouette. And then you're like, oh, no, let's crank it up higher. That's directly into your eye, unless you're doing a screen, which I only recommend using a screen. But like, that doesn't like help that much. And you have to go closer and then like kind of pair off the sides to try to block the light to get it to, no, it doesn't work that way. You still create this artificial scenario where you're like pushing light through it. But gentle light is what they experience. They're underground. Maybe they're close to the surface, so sunlight's definitely getting through, but it's gentle light. So I operate like a darkroom. And I use light in a lot of different ways. And there's, I'll reveal this because you started the reveal. And you, I love talking to you. Every time I talk to you, you reveal something else that you've been like holding back. You're such an incredible person like that. But there's a special angle, to getting it to do that. So it's not just light, from above. So there, which is super interesting, but that's also, again, what I realized very early on is that we're not when they designed these things, it was all linear, up and down, and it's like that, like how we need to be able to visualize these things as close to what is naturally their state as possible, because then we can actually see their behaviors. That light field thing also. And I can do it with a slide cover on it, has no slide cover on it. So you actually can see the way the particles are attached and the attachments from the roots to those particles. And it's like, you can't see that if you drown it in water.
No. If you drowned it and you put the slide cover on, you're going to smush everything down. Surface tension is going to squish it and spread things out, and it's going to make it not natural. So if you want the sample, you just take the fresh drop, put it on the slide, and you have to navigate around in 3 dimensions in that drop to get resolution to see what you want to see.
But with this, it's totally different because you can actually, it's so gentle too. So we're able to see, and what inspired it was the bottom left one, epifluorescence. That's actually a cyan blue light. It's this color. That blue, and it makes it green. And when things are like really fluorescing, see how it's green like that?
Yeah.
That's what's coming through the filter. And out of that, there's a special green. So it's like everything's kind of greenish. And then there's this like glowing yellowish green, and that's always fungi. So that's how easy it is. If I had a root here, it would just show you the areas that are inoculated. And so it's grids. Like the way they actually measure these things is grids, and they just play Minecraft with the grid and then spend all this time counting the blocks. And I'm like, can we automate that? And they're like, my friends who are in programming are like, that's not even machine learning, Matt. That's just automation. We can do that in our sleep.
Yeah. I mean, it's so simple. It's a grid. It's like old stuff.
Yeah. And so, but no one's done it. No one's taken the time to do it. And now, because I pointed it out, because I brought it up, there's been this like huge upwelling of support for this, because people realize they're like, this is needful. This this is the only way that we're going to get clarity. So I'm really excited about it. All right, so I got it on 1/4 of an acre, shade cloth, drip hose, and not weeding too much works here in Missouri. All right, well, when we get a bionutrient meter on your food, because those are going to become increasingly common, you'll be able to see how nutrient dense your food is, and then you'll be like, oh my word, my food.
Yeah. So how many questions have you answered?
That was the first one.
All right. Well, I got them here, so don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
Okay.
The first one, and well, All the Sun says grow your own food. So indeed, All the Sun. And we revealed an article coming out about glyphosate residue and cross-contamination. And also in an update I did just the other night in a podcast over at Oppenheimer Ranch, what we revealed is that they had found a farmer, he was an organic farmer, and they took his license in 2000. He continued to sell corn and soybeans to the tune of $47 million worth. And it is flooded into the market in the United States. $47 million worth of corn and soybeans purported to be organic in the organic food supply, which is basically tainted at 10%. So buying that organic food at the store is not necessarily, if it is a processed food. We're not talking about fresh organic produce. In this case, he's selling corn and soybeans that go in the processing market of organics. So any of the boxed organic crackers or products like that, chips, completely tainted with glyphosate. And this is extremely egregious when you see $47 million worth of misappropriated, chemical tainted food going into the organic stream. It's no wonder when people study all organic products that they all have glyphosate residue. They're blaming it on the conveyor belts. How about the guy that sold $47 million fraudulently? How about that?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, I remember reading about that. And the thing is, the way that glyphosate works is it attacks the same way that our digestion works. It attacks that in all the different processes. In the
so
soil.
it's a chelator. It's a chelator, which is prevents nutrient uptake. So if you were able to like coat your entire digestive system, prevent nutrients from coming up into your body, very similar to what glyphosate does. And it's killing the weeds, but it's also giving you a sick plant, even though it looks healthy. The plant is not taking up the same nutrition. And we know this. I mean, we've known this from the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania, going back decades, that organic food is more nutrient dense, period. There's not even an argument. People still are arguing that there is no difference between,
would you point out though that the Rodale Organic, they've always had compost, they've always had biodynamic preps involved. When I say that, like the organic movement, the majority of the people that like are getting their food that's quote organic is from the industrial complex of organic that didn't fix the soil. The small farmers, the mom and pop farmers, the produce farmers, they're the ones that proved out all the things that Rodale has been talking about and created the science for the backbone of the regenerative agriculture movement. So it was their pioneering efforts that actually opened the door for all of this to be seen, because before we had living soil with compost and finally bringing animal manures back into the loop, before that, the plants were sterilized of the microbes that actually allow their microbiome to self-regulate. So it's like what we're afraid of doing to our own gut and killing our microbiome, we had already done to the plants. And only when the knowledge in the 90s and the early aughts really began to get out did we have enough evidence and enough working examples to see the endophytes in plants. And now we're at a point with my course and this Kickstarter that we have protocols to actually visualize, to actually count, to actually diagnose our plants for these endophytes and for these surface dwelling microbes and fungi on our plant leaves. Never been done before. But again, it's simple as can be. It's grids, it's percentages. Let's go. We just need to visualize it in those different ways so that we can get an actual holistic understanding, because just doing one test gives us one perspective.
Yeah. So if you don't have any idea what Matt's saying, and a lot of you probably don't, because he's getting into the nitty gritty of his Kickstarter and the soil and the microscopy course and things that you'll learn there, because you don't have the book yet. You can glean a lot of it in some of the videos that he's already put up, which is awesome. But what Matt and I have determined just from our conversations is that you know how we have the water cycle and the rock cycle, there's a soil cycle. And we don't have all the pieces together to draw it correctly. We can draw it the way we know it so far, but just from our discussions and that all the composting and everything that we find going through, Matt, you and I determined that it is the inclusion of the poop from farm animals to complete the microbiota cycle. Because what we learned from the GMO movement and all the papers peer-reviewed, published 12 years ago that started the march against Monsanto, was that these glyphosate products are killing gut bacteria. They're actually replicating pesticide in your stomach, which travels through your gut. So humans, of course, they have celiac disease. Of course, they're allergic. Of course, they're sick. Of course, they have cancer. They're eating things to give them that. But if we go back into the old, it's all the olden ways, just what grandma said, you are what you eat. If you go back into that biodynamic farming, Rodale proved it. We know what chicken tractors do. I know what the chicken poop and the water that flows across does to the crops right in front of that fence. They are 20 times more vigorous than anything you could imagine, because they have the microbiota, they have the gut bacteria from the chickens, and then they have the nitrates and the nitrogen. So it's like a perfect cocktail coming from the butts of animals. Then you add the poop, the pig poop, and then the chickens eat the pig poop and redigest that. And it's a perfect cocktail for the perfect biome. For the worst soil, we have the most acidic, clay-rich, crappy, devoid nothingness. It's dust. And in just 7 years, we have... Say again?
But you have a paradise now.
Yeah, 7 years. So, and it's getting better. Every year, I'm like more amazed at what's happening. You go from 2 foot corn to 3 foot corn to 6 foot corn to 7 foot corn. And you're like, wow, we did something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've had so much momentum in this that we have so many people out there that are all stars at making compost, have good soil already, want to share what they're doing. And so this database is actually a place that they can do that. They can put the soil tests from the microscope, from even the local extension center from your soil. Every additional test will actually add exponential value to the whole. And because it's open and transparent, and you can even be anonymous, it really allows everyone to participate.
Yeah, and the objective here is to build that national, international database that we can cross-reference our biome, our soil, our compost, our mycorrhiza with others. And that's simply from observational science. It's like we're getting back into the olden days. And when I re-looked at this today at its success and I was looking at it, I felt a sense of nostalgia. I was like, I had remembered, you're a little younger than me, but I can't guarantee back in the day, they had the same stuff I did. There was like connector sets and we had Radio Shack, like experiments with electronics. And we had the microscope kit you could buy at KB Toy. Remember all that? And the science experiment kit where you could collect bugs and look at them. So when I looked at this, I was like, this is a rehashing of the 70s and 80s where you could buy that kit in the back of the comic book, only this takes it to the next level where you can literally be above university level, cutting edge work where we have the university tools. We have the cutting edge telescopes. They're not 20 grand anymore. You can get one for 2,400. For 300, you can get a telescope that works enough to do everything in the whole microscope textbook that you're putting out. You don't need to have the top of the line, and the top of the line has come way down. So we can literally be our own CERN when it comes to soil. So instead of trillions of misappropriated dollars from governments, it's just the small person that has a couple of extra minutes or hours. It's all based on what you do. You could literally collect everyone's soil from every farm in your bioregion and do all the work for them and put it up there, which is what Matt's looking for. But a lot of us don't have that time, but we might have that time in the future. We don't know what the future brings, but this is definitely
doing exactly what you're saying. She is going to every single permaculture site and eco community in Australia on a road trip and gathering soil samples so that she can map out across as many tests as and she's also buying all the tests. She's got every fluorescence. She's so excited. And she's going to map out all the best soils, and it's going to have the highest ranking, most fungal dominant compost. It's going to have the highest organic matter levels. And then you go click on that and you'll see the nutrient density of their plants. And so we'll be able to choose the farmers that we buy from, and then their compost style, the compost ingredients, because bioregionally, the ingredients are going to matter. You may be, on an island and you're working with like sugarcane grasses, right? You may be, up in Missoula in Montana, and you may be working with tons of pine. It's all going to matter for your bioregion, and every single one of those organic matter sources is going to have its own unique effect, which is going to lend itself to quick remediation and growth of certain foods, certain classifications of foods. The sky's the limit, but we have to put these things together. The cycles are waiting for us, but we have to understand what they are. We got to know what they are in order to actually put them together.
So as this progresses, I literally see this as a game changer, whereas just like you were saying there, in bioregions, farms, and people that are following the database or whatever, they're going to know where the best soil is, which means the best produce, the highest nutrient dense, best product. And so if that slips, let's say I'm at the farmer's market and I'm the guy doing the soil test, and I know, I'm like, wow, White Mountain Farm is 5 times superior than anybody. So why would you buy onions or eggplant or tomatoes from anywhere else, or cucumbers, except for them? It's the same price. And then it's going to catch wind. So the farmers are going to be like, what? There's some kind of database on Microbial. We got the best food. They're going to want to know. Other farms are going to be like, well, how come nobody's buying our produce? What's going on? And then everyone has to get involved. And why wouldn't you? Because the bottom line here is increase production, increase production, increase production. There's no bottom line. There's no, there's no downturn here. It's that everyone gets better soil. And when you have better soil, the production just goes up and up until it's insane. Yeah. And so what we'll have is super production of super nutrient dense foods that are organically grown with intention. So, and I think that the intention part puts more energy into the product. What say you?
I completely agree. Yeah. I think so much of this is tying all the best parts of who we are together. And so it brings community, it brings the best food, it brings the best out in people too, because we're going to be honoring the people who are doing the right things. And it's going to give people who aren't quite there yet a clear path for improvement. And that kind of clarity allows us to discern good, better, best as consumers, but also for the farmers for the first time. They've been struggling and wanting to know where to invest their money, where to invest their time to get better returns. And then as these things build up, farmers, when they have an abundance, turn their abundance into value-added products. So there's never like too much. So we're going to see all of our farmers create food that we've never tasted before. The flavors are. We were talking to Jeff Lowenfels, author of Teaming with Nutrients, Teaming with Microbes, Teaming with Fungi, and soon to be Teaming with Bacteria. And he was saying that the flavors and our communications between microbes. And I've always said that, the microbes must be there to trigger those things. But he was saying that it's actually communication, because terpenes are actually communication between microbes.
Right.
And so the more microbes you have, and the more vibrant and vigorous. And by the way, I want to tie in paramagnetism, because the Earth's actual geomagnetism is a huge effect on the microbes. And I'm going to get a paramagnetic test kit so that I start mapping the relationship between the paramagnetism of the soil and the microbes, because it's already been proven that they're linked. But let's see.
I have a soil magnetometer in my Amazon store. It's like, I don't know, $80. I have one here. It's genius. You just put the 2 electrodes in, you get a reading, and you can move it around. So you can literally test the geomagnetism of Earth at that spot, and it moves around based on soil and subsurface. So you just take your readings and come back and get more. And so this is, again, another database that needs to be
I'm going to add that in.
Created, gathered, and through time, then you start to get the answers. And speaking of answers, and speaking of your Kickstarter, we're trying to give back to the community. Let's give back to the community and answer some questions of people who tuned in. Some simple ones. All right, the first question is going to be, a lot of people are having problems with seeds germinating. Now, it could be a number of things. How you stored the seeds. If you stored them improperly, they got too hot, or they hit the light, or they got a little humidity and it sparked them to pre-sprout, and then they dried, they're dead. They're no longer viable. So if you pre-initiated a seed and you're still saving it and it didn't shoot a sprout out where you can see it, it's a dead seed. And that could be due to improper storage. The other thing is you might have bad soil. You might have bad conditions. You might have soil lock where think you're watering and there's no actual water getting into the seed. And so a lot of people will soak their seeds first, and you can soak seeds 6, 12, 24 hours. At some point past 12, lots of seeds break down and start to rot. So I wouldn't recommend more than 12 hours unless you have a thick, hard seed like squash or bean. If you have squash or bean, you can soak that baby till it sprouts. It's not going to drown. You can also wrap your seeds in wet cloth, and that helps to germinate it too. And that prevents the drowning scenario. So by pre-germinating seeds, that prevents you from screwing up. And I pre-germinate or I pre-sprout in cells so that I know if I have a bad seed batch before I go out, and I plan them all out at the right moon cycle, and I wait a week and nothing's happening. And then I wait another week just in case. And then it's too late because I'm now 2 weeks in and nothing happened. And I'm like, darn it. But if you're sprouting in pieces of paper, in 2 or 3 days, you're going to know if they're viable, and you're going to be able to just plan them out. So that is that's basically all I can say about non-germinating seeds and the stuff I've learned. Also, I've seen guys use a nail clipper and clip the end off a squash seed. If you want to just direct plant it, you just clip the connector part. And if you look at a regular seed, there's one tip that has an obvious nub on it that was the connection where it grew. And that's the tip you want to clip off. It's not going to kill the seed and allow water in there. But those are all my tips to germination. Also use the moon cycle. Only plant during the waxing of the moon. So all the way from the brand new moon, all the way for 28 days, you plant, and then you stop during the waning of the moon, or it's 14 days. You got 14 days to plant and then 14 days to wax. So you go wax and wane. You know what I'm saying? Only when the moon is growing to full do you want to plant fruit producing seeds. During the waning moon, you plant your tubers and your potatoes. So you can get those moon cycles anywhere. So Matt, what do you have to add to that conversation?
I think that was awesome as a great start. So I will take it from there. And so I studied this a lot because I worked at Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, and there were crazy seeds there that they had trouble germinating to do their tests because they had to do germination tests. So whenever I'm working with older seeds, I take 10 of them and I put them with a wet paper towel, just like you said, or a napkin, in a almost closed Ziploc bag.
Yeah, a zippy. Yeah. It's like a humidor.
And then I put it on something warmish, not warm, warmish. And I let it germinate. And it should germinate within like 24 to 48 hours max for like everything that I want to do. Because I've trained my seeds using throw sow. So,
yeah, but to do it quickly, it has to be at that warm temperature.
Right. Yes. Basically, we're incubating it. So what they did was they would use orange juice. They would use, that's how they got the banana seeds to germinate. And they never told people that. I was always like, okay, you're gonna tell people that? All right. But I did. But like the acidity of that. So some people use lemon juice. And so certain seeds need heat, extreme heat, like boiling water. Certain
Fire.
seeds, a little bit of fire. And it could even be like, I'm pretty sure the smell of fire, which opens up a whole different other thing. Maybe the microbes are triggered inside and it's causes, right? So that touches upon the next thing. So whenever I'm doing seeds, I am soaking them, and I'm doing as like a pre-germination warm up. And so they're soaking in not just water, but endophytic inoculants. So I'm soaking them in microbes that are going into them with the water. And these are microbes that will instantly begin to feed the plant. And so these seeds, their root is just waking up for the first time, their initial root, and it immediately has these endophytes providing nitrogen inside.
Now,
And
there
so,
is an issue with that I've learned. Like when you inoculate beans,
right.
So I have my legumes, I have my leguminous inoculant, which is specific. There's other inoculants like Myco-Bliss you can use for all seeds, which has a more broad-based inoculant for mycorrhiza. But what I learned on the for the bean legume is that you'll actually, if you put the inoculant, which is a dry powder, so this has the rhizobium. If you put it into water and you let the bean soak it up, after about 2 hours, some of the rhizobium starts to drown. And then after 12 hours, almost all the rhizobium is dead if you just keep it in straight water. I don't know if those are the same stats with the Myco-Bliss, the more broad-based, but when I inoculate now, and just to eliminate all that, I'll soak the seeds first and then just throw the inoculant on it before I plant, last hour or something.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable?
I do. I actually add it right before I I pour out the water. So I soak it first, just like you do. And I pour out the water until it's just a little bit. And then I add the inoculant. So it's almost like a slurry.
Yeah. So it spreads. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So it spreads on it. And then it's not like, and from there, like basically like it just is all coated. And so then I can plant each one of those and it will have like a coating on the outside of it. So that's exactly what I do. Like 15 minutes before, mix it, let it sit, and then just go.
Yeah. And like you're telling people, then all that mycorrhiza is there in the bacteria that you need at the moment of inception. So when the seed cracks, it can get in there and it can start communicating. So at that moment, the seed knows it's okay. That's what the amazing thing is. This is what's happening. The fungi are communicating with the seed and saying, you're okay. I'm here and I can give you the nutrients. And the seed's like, oh, it's boom time.
Yeah, that's absolutely what's going on. Basically, the seed has a receptive audience the moment it begins pulsing out exudation. And they're in there too already, like they flow in with the water. So they begin the process of nitrogen fixing and feeding the plant right then. And we can see this with a microscope.
Which is why you should get involved with the Kickstarter now so you can understand all this. As we learn together, this is a community experiment. Some are more experts than others, but together we're going to bring this whole idea of increasing nutrient density into foods that everyone can do, and we can outsource the money funders that have been providing us with nutrient deficient food that causes cancer. I mean, it's that genius. The food we eat is not even suited for sheep at this point. So, but I could say everything I produce here at the farm is spectacular, and anyone that eats it is blessed. They feel better. And that's just what we're here all about. Now, I want to quick answer this one question coming from a super chat, Lavira Lucchini. She says she loves the info. Can buying bees or worms be genetically modified organisms? And I'm going to say no, Lavira. Thank God they can't be. But and buy all your worms from Greens Greg. Greens Greg, he's down in Alabama. He's got the YouTube channel we promoted. He's awesome. He'll send you, 2.5 kilograms for like $30. It's 50,000 red wigglers. And I got 2 boxes over the last 7 years and put them in all my greenhouses. And obviously now I have millions of red wigglers. I even put them out in the permaculture orchard where we had no red wigglers. And they're everywhere. I was just digging around today. These are Southern Alabama red wigglers in the desert here because we water, we have the nutrient density, and they're breaking everything down for us. They're amazing. Worms and bees can't be GMO. Bees, however, can be tainted from the source. And what I'm talking about is an unfortunate thing about honey itself. All the bees in the world are now being treated with oxalic acid. There is no clean honey in the entire world. The entire honey supply you buy, first of all, 10 years ago was tainted by agave nectar and other fake nectars that were being blended with 10% honeys. So almost no honey. When it's called real honey, trademark, that meant 10% honey and 90% other stuff from China. These are vats being created in China. So only buy honey from a local beekeeper or a local source. It's always going to beat market value for an equivalent product. You're going to get exactly what you want to get. But the problem is, like, the local beekeepers here in the San Luis Valley that sell 5-gallon buckets and stuff, Matt, they call themselves natural beekeepers, but they use oxalic acid. So they're still treating bees. And I don't want chemicals in my honey. Do you? No. So always look for a natural beekeeper. They're around. Our honey is at a premium. And what we're going to do, what we've been doing is ramping it up. So we'll probably produce about $20,000 worth of honey this year.
Whoa.
Yeah. Which is, for a normal person, the same amount of honey is only worth about 8,000 because it's treated honey. Right. But if you have biodynamic organic honey that has the propolis, the bee bread and the comb, I mean, come on, it's a no-brainer. This is like ancient.
On that?
Go ahead.
Are you using a Brix meter on that?
Oh, I would love to. I have Brix meter here.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean,
I've only ever used it on squash just to predict how long it's going to store. And if you get good Brix on squash, I have a squash in here that I picked in September, and it's still good. It's July of next year.
Oh yeah. Squash.
People don't get that.
Squash is the survival crop that people overlook constantly. They just think it's for pies and for carving, but squash is, I would say, the most versatile because you can eat the seeds, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the stems, and then you can eat the young fruits, and you can eat the old fruits, and then the fully mature fruits can last over a year. I mean, think about the Hubbards. The green and blue Hubbards. Ooh.
Well, one of the longest storing, and I grew a little extra this year, is Turban. This is a hardened, dark orange, nutrient dense. It looks like a turban on your head.
The bottom part, right?
Yeah, it'll get super hard if you leave it on. It will literally, if it's a weapon. So if you leave it out till October, you could literally have these weapons at your door that you're storing for months. You could throw it at someone and knock them out. These are amazing squash.
Off the wall.
And they store the seed. You don't have to seed save. You could store the squash, eat it in 5 months, and the seeds are ready to sprout. They're plumping because they're living off the squash. And if you cook the seed then you get all the benefit and anti-cancer causing everything. From squash seeds are one of the oldest medicines on earth.
And not only that, you could literally eat the sprouts. Like, that's the thing. I always, whenever we would do any harvest of any squash, I'd be like, oh, these are just food seeds. Like, if it's from like an organic store thing and we don't know what the actual, like, the children of this squash will be, you know what I mean? Like, what the next generation will be. We would be like, oh, but this is food still. And this could last years. And then at any moment we defrost it and then it becomes food again. Like, that's the thing. People are like, oh, my cheese won't do well in the freezer. It's like, your seeds love your freezer. And it's like, everyone should have a fridge. This is like my seed pass showing, like, full of seeds. I do right there, an entire fridge full of seeds.
But side note, it needs to be frost free. Fridge. Yeah.
Right.
So it needs to be a fridge.
That means that we need seeds that are so well dried down that when you take it down to that temperature, you're not freeze drying them. Like they're not like wicking the moisture out of them inside that actual bag that you did. And if they're truly dried down and you did a good job, then
you're using an airtight bag, you're golden.
Yeah, airtight bag, and nothing will happen. But yeah.
Now, Patrick Belmare, he says, and he's a moderator, he who controls the food supply controls the people. And this was one of our mantras during the March Against Monsanto. And people were saying, why would people want to control the food supply? That's stupid. And I'm like, hello, if you can raise petrol to $12 a gallon and raise the food prices to $50 a pound for steak, they win. You're starving. That means you are starving to death, and you are complicit, and you will have to comply. You'll have to stand in the bread line. People are so removed from the bread line. And this is a recurring episode about every 60 years during a multi-decadal oscillation that we have bread lines. And this has to do with geopolitical things that are happening at the same time as environmental things. And so we have these climate cycles. We have the Dust Bowl back in the 30s. And then what happened then? The same time that the Great Depression, it's all related. And people are just waking up to this. I've seen some mainstream journalists just this month. They're like, I looked into this, and I don't think that humans are causing this. And I looked into it, and back in the 1800s, the same thing happened all over the world. And they even read a book where back in the 1700s, it was even worse. And I'm like, oh my God, these people are just learning history. Can you imagine getting through all your university work and then being a reporter for decades, and you just read a book to learn about recent history on Earth? I mean, how stupid do you have to be?
But so I've been in that world a little bit, and they're so insulated, and they're on a treadmill, and they don't get off the treadmill. And so they're like, read these lines, keep going, you're doing great. And they're like, okay. And they're just like on a little hamster wheel. And everyone's telling them they're doing great. They sound great. You sound great. You look great. And
Matt, can you turn up your volume a little?
I can turn up. All right, here we go. Yeah, but like they're so insulated, they have no idea what they're talking about. That's why when like Joe Rogan had that guy like Sanjay Gupta on, it was the greatest reveal. Everyone's like, this guy's a doctor? And the guy's like, and they're like, and how do you manage to be on a regular television show? Because he reads lines. And it's like, all these people are just line readers. From our highest politicians, repeat again, say with feeling. Okay, I will say it with feeling now. You know what I mean? It's like, they're all reading off prompters, all of them. And my mom, early on when I was a kid, my mom was actually like a local politician for our town, and she told me that they all have cards, and sometimes they all say the same exact thing, like verbatim. And then increasingly, we're seeing that this is how it works. They're just reading off of cards,
this is dangerous for democracy.
Right. And so this
increasing food nutrient density is dangerous to democracy.
We have to expose what works and do it in a way that allows us all to be empowered to be able to choose, to see. Because if we can't see and we can't test and see those results, we can't know. And that's what it's really all about. So I'm really excited. What's the next question?
All right, man, we're going to be testing our ass off here. I can't wait to get involved in this. But before we promote more people to get involved in the Kickstarter, we have to answer more questions.
Yeah.
And this is an open-ended, this is just a statement, but I'm going to use it as a question because it's true. This is the roller coaster temperature swings. And this is predicted. So just like I said, when you look in the historical past and you see that there's been times in history, 1800 to 1830, when it was really hot and really cold all at the same time, and it screwed everyone up because everything was normal. Everything was rolling along, cushy, food growing, everything, normal summers and winters. And all of a sudden, like one summer, it was like hot and cold and flooding in one area and dry in the other. And it was all different. And that's the same thing we're seeing now. And this is not
But,
new. It happened in the 1800s. It happened in the 1700s.
but it's permaculture that prepares us for all of that.
Yeah, and that's it. So
Having
the
that
design out, yeah, the design out here captures all the flood rains. So if we get 4 inches of rain, it's going to capture it. It's not going to flood the crops. It's going to capture it in swales and put it to the roots.
And and when your orchard's a mature orchard, under those trees, the temperature is going to be so different than on the bare the bare desert, you know, 5 miles
and then if you're just beginning, like, so I have those shade areas developing now. It's great. It's literally 20 degrees colder in some spots. It's never been that temperature here ever.
And that's ever change, isn't it?
Yeah. And all the chickens live there because they're like, this is perfect. But also when you begin, you can learn to heavy mulch. When you start any permaculture swale, you build it, you seed it, then you mulch it to the depth of a meter. I mean, you mulch it to death because whatever makes it through the mulch is going to make it. And the mulch is going to be your new soil.
Turn it into a sheet compost, like mulch it to like the degree that it actually turns into a giant hot compost. Yes. And if you got a tarp, even better, do a manure, like mix water with manure and work it into the mulch and then cover it. Use all this heat that's coming through everywhere right now to heat that up. And then within weeks, you have straight up compost rich soil right there.
And then, so this soil then can retain moisture for a long length of time, especially if it's not totally black on top and getting baked by the sun in the desert. You just need a lighter covered mulch on top to preserve it again. So you remulch. And my soils here, if I do a good, like equivalent 1 inch, 2 inch rain, which is a long time of sprinklers, I mean like 6 hours, it could retain moisture for 4 to 7 days, depending on the cloud cover. And usually in single 24-hour cycle, everything gets baked dry here. And that's the problem of growing. It gets stunted, the roots die, and they have to redevelop those roots. So you want to protect the roots through mulching. And people don't understand, like Ruth Stout, get that book from the 1940s or whatever it is. I have the originals. Yeah, get it. I mean, this old lady just put out a foot of straw, threw some seeds in and hit it with the hose and crossed her fingers. And then a month later, she was like, holy crap, it worked.
Yeah. Grandma got it right. Yeah. So we all could be transforming the soil. You could be mixing biochar into that mulch mix and increasing. So biochar, for its mass, when it holds water, increases by 3 times. So if you add 10% to your soil, like of your soil profile, suddenly is biochar. When it rains or you water, you've increased your water holding capacity by 30%. So and organic matter is similar.
Do you want a testimonial on biochar?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So my neighbor, he built the ultimate biochar combustor. It's like, a 50-gallon drum. It's got all the tubes. It's over a pit, and it tells you how to do it. Now, biochar is not just making charcoal. You don't just make charcoal. So it's a process of low temperature charcoal making where I don't know what he's doing. He's regasifying it or whatever. But in the end, he soaked it and inoculated it. He put this in his raised beds. He read all the books. This guy has spent money in all the permaculture courses. He did this about 5 years ago. His raised beds. So the soil went from 2 feet. Now it's down to about 8 inches over those years. And he goes away to Costa Rica and he's not coming back for another month. So, and what I'm allowed to do is go, because he owns the 10 acres next to me. I manage his raised beds and I plant what I want there. So I'm like, I do experiments. So I'm like, I'm going to do 20 of these here and 20 of these here, 10 of these here and 10 of these here. The stuff I grow in the biochar, because I don't have time to go water it. It barely rains here. I'm just like, cross my fingers. I'm like, it'll make it or won't. It always makes it. And it's always twice as vigorous and twice as green and twice as leafy in the initial stages of growth than anything I've ever seen. So there is definite, why is that happening? Is the biochar creating phosphorus or nitrogen? Why is it so green?
Well, first of all, it's holding the 3 times the amount of water. But
Yeah.
then, so it's 3 times its mass in water that it can hold. But then on top of that, all the life that can live inside that water, it's fostering. And because of the charge of creating that purified carbon, that mineralized carbon, that's a charged habitat. So it can really hold all the nutrients that come in through the rains, all
So
the
it's like
nutrients.
an ionizing platform where it can, so it is taking in all the ionized minerals, nutrients, whatever, holding it on the charcoal. And then when the root comes by, the charcoal's like, I got it all, baby.
Yeah. And then the root pours out protons, which are H plus, which is all part of hydrolysis. So they're breaking the water. So when people are talking about pH, they're actually talking about the microbes and the plant's abilities to release protons into the soil. And how many protons are there currently in the soil tells you how acidified it is. And so the amount of energy, because they're electrons, that the soil can hold expands exponentially with biochar and organic matter. And before, they thought there was a ceiling, CEC, the cation exchange capacity. They thought there was this exchange ceiling, but the biochar, but the organic matter and the microbes break all those rules of the traditional chemical ag way of thinking. And it's because they had terrible soil, and they also didn't have any tests that would tell them anything about the biology.
Yeah, well, this Kickstarter is going to give us all the tests and all the data we need to understand our crappy soil. And let's start with a crappy soil, like one around here. And if you go further south and west of here, it gets more chelated and it gets even worse. And Rusty Runs with Scissors is doing an excellent job south of here with his permaculture forest in a high desert hideaway. But he says this: drought increases the mineral content in our local water. So as I'm drawing down my well here, by the time I hit August and I only can do 1,000 gallons every 4 hours, if I do TDS in there, it's almost at 400. Where at the beginning of the season, it's at 190. And people are telling me that I'm actually stunting my plants by overusing this. I should only use the rainwater. But luckily, I went down to the river. I tested that. It's about 60 all year. So for about $5,000, I'm going to bring a 1/4 mile pipe up to the orchard with the river water, so I can change it in July to go from well to river. And then we'll just use the well water for the house, and we can use the filters to clear out the TDS. And that's because it's affecting the quality of our food. Now, Runs with Scissors says the drought increases the mineral content in local water, which is true. And then we're stuck with just this high TDS water it's going to water the plants, but they're also going to be like, But you and I have talked about ways that that's not true. And it reduces the viability of plants, and the salts then increase in the soil. So can we get a soil with a microbiome correct, that if we put in this because I know, look, I've been down to the Jersey Shore on the salt flat or wherever the people are living in the $1 million condos, and they can do something with their salty water and their sandy soil, and they can grow amazing gardens. So clearly there is a solution to high TDS and salts. I don't know about it, but you're the soil scientist, so talk to me.
Definitely EM. They've been using EM to treat salty soils, salty irrigation, algae-ridden irrigation, algae-ridden canals. They've also been using it to clean up sewage in local waterways. So when it's, remember that EM effective microbes is beer yeast, purple non-sulfur bacteria, and streptomyces, and
lactobacillus.
And lactobacilli. And so it's those combination of things that we can actually develop on our own at home that allows us to actually take down all those very scary things. You know what I mean? The weather, especially if it's affecting our system and our food. But the solutions are so simple. It's like Bill Mollison said, you know what I mean? The problems are increasingly complex that they say, but the solutions remain simple, you know?
Yeah, because what the EM1 does is it regulates the minerals. And just like we said, and just like beam compost, which is EM1 on steroids, that's what it is. That's why it's more expensive. It's because it has all the microbiome, it has all the bacteria. So if you literally make the beam compost tea, which has nothing to do with aeration or bubbling, you simply take the beam compost and throw it in water, wash the stuff off in water with it. It's that simple. If you do that, what you're going to do is inoculate the soil in the Southwest like here. So if I have to water with my high TDS well water with salts in it, the beam is going to neutralize it. It's going to hold it up. It's going to tell the plants, wait a minute, I know you don't need this. I'll give you what you need. I'm going to keep this here. And what's not happening, if you don't have the essential micronutrients in place, you're going to increase continuously the amount of minerals that are going to affect your plant growth in a negative fashion. It's going to bioaccumulate continuously, and it's going to get worse and worse. You need the micronutrient, EM, there, correct, Matt, to regulate the nutrients in that soil.
Absolutely. And I would add that the bean compost that you guys have is really amazing because it's so fungal, and fungi, they're the alchemists of the soil. So they're the ones that are going to be able to like just use everything and then change the forms of everything and cycle everything. And so when we add them in large amounts, like in the bean, it is an incredible way to transform things. And I think what's so cool about the beam directions that you guys have is the fact that you don't aerate it. Because thinking about air, like you said, oxalic acid, right, earlier, oxidizing anything releases the energy in it. And so we don't want oxidized things because they've lost their energy already. When we're doing EM and where we're doing all these fungal and reduced things, one of the ways that you could kill the energy in it is by bubbling it and oxidizing it with oxygen. Yeah. And that liberates the energy.
Yeah, one of the dumbest things, and we'll do a parody here. One of the dumbest things people that want to eat healthier do is start to eat smoothies. All right, they start to eat smoothies. They buy all these things and they put it in the blender, and they put the ice in and they put all the ingredients in, and they push that frappe and they run it for like 4 minutes. You know, they want it perfect. Every single second you're crushing the fruit is oxidizing every single mineral in there. So if you frappe your smoothie for 4 minutes, it has become a nutrient deficient sugar hellhole. It's pretty, it tastes delicious, but it is not what you think you're getting. So if you want to make a smoothie, crush the fruit, put it into the blender, put it in with your ingredients, and you blend it for like 5-8 seconds. That's it. And that should be your top line, because what you're incorporating that oxygen in with the minerals, you're oxidizing everything, and it's becoming the same thing as you would buy in the center of the supermarket. Processed food that is not helpful. You want to eat a fresh strawberry. You don't want to eat a strawberry that tastes like a strawberry that has no more nutrition in it. I mean, come on.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And how long you wait as well. I mean, when we were doing the Gerson therapy for my wife, when she was recovering from thyroid cancer and melanoma cancer, we had to drink the juices. She had to drink the juice, but we all drank the juices together. But she had to drink one within 10 minutes. And otherwise the enzymes would start to die. Otherwise, like all of these things that are like, and we're also doing like the special juicer that's gentle so that it doesn't oxidize it, you know. And then we've got the press. We had the actual hydraulic press for the juice and the cloth bags. Your microphone, my friend.
Yeah, there's always oxygen, no matter how light you're doing it. You're always like squishing it a little bit. And that's why the 10 minutes happens. Even if I squished a little bit in, all that's in there and it's trying to attack everything. Bam, 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 bam. So just, that's why when you do wheatgrass in a grinder or in a hand press, you want to do the wheatgrass. I mean, if you let that sit there for 5 minutes, like they do at the store or in the mall where you got the wheatgrass already done and you could buy one. Like, when did you press this? Oh, like an hour ago. But like, that's grass piss water. That's useless. Yeah.
And the only way to know this is to do it yourself. Play with your juicer. Try the juice immediately. Try the juice 10 minutes later, and you're going to be like, wow, this tastes like store juice. You know what I mean? Or like an hour later in the fridge, you're going to be like, this tastes no different than the bottle house, you know what I mean? Like the Whole Foods water, right? So this is what it comes down to with so many things, is that we have to do it ourselves. We have to grow the food ourselves. We have to prepare the food ourselves, because otherwise the food is not fresh. Fresh is, I mean, honestly, the most fresh, like straight off the vine, straight out of the ground, is going to have so much more life, so much more energy. And this has been proven over and over and over.
This is a really funny comment that is just mind opening. And it's just like the grandma used to say, you are what you eat. Now, this is interesting because I never even thought about it. What do dogs do? They pee on trees. They pee on shrubs. They pee on plants right at the source of the stem to the roots. Their genetics, whatever has taught the animal, is to get the nitrogen to the plant. They're literally fertilizing plants. And other wild animals don't necessarily do this. Deer, and I watch deer and elk all the time. I'm a hunter. I live in nature. They just, poop falls out of their butt as they walk, but it's falling where they're eating.
Yeah.
So they're fertilizing their patch and they don't even know it. All this type of genetic code. And what's happening on Earth is the definition of permaculture. So if you're just realizing that your dog pees on your plants and that's fertilizer, then you haven't been listening to anything Matt and I've been saying for 10 years. But if it's the same thing, if you go out into the forest and you witness nature, and to witness permaculture, which is the dialogue between the aerial and the subaerial. So yeah, and I don't know if that really shows it, but
no, but it shows relationships.
The relationship is from the atmosphere down through the plant, through the biome, to the surface, through the subsurface, all the way to the bedrock. And so there's so much going on there. You literally need to have multiple degrees or be as eccentric as Matt and I to get into this, right? To totally understand what's going on with permaculture, you need to start with geology. Then you have to become a soil scientist. Then you could be you have to definitely get into hydrology and maybe geomorphology, the erosion of the surface. And that's just for sciences. And we haven't even got to the surface. Then you got botany, and then you got, and on and on. Just at the surface, we're all through all the plant biologies. And then you get into atmospheric science, and then you get into climatology, and then you get into paleobotany, then you get into paleoclimatology. So you would literally need like 12, 14, 4-year degrees just to really have a grip on what we're trying to explain with permaculture. Or you could have a degree or a specialty in one of those areas like you and I do, and then you could submerge yourself in it and live in that paradigm. Because it's funny, like when permaculture became a little kitschy like 8 years ago and everyone was taking the classes, everyone came out and they all realized, oh, permaculture is only local. You can't go to a class and learn how to do it everywhere. You can learn the tools to do it, but it certainly is when you start talking about triads or zones or planting different plants together in cohesive nature that they benefit each other. You can't know that unless you live exactly there for a few years and you see what's going on around you. Just because one lady in Minnesota says, when I do borage near my tomatoes, oh my God. And that's when we start to then do things like these Kickstarters and we crowdsource. One of the most great examples of permaculture crowdsourcing came from Canada and the NPK method of orchard planting. And this is early on, and this comes from Fermi Farms. And I know you know who I'm talking about. And when I first started watching his videos, they were so practical because he's just telling me for 10 years, I looked at this crap and did this, and this is what happened. But then he looked at the books and the science, and he's like, and that's why. And then it evolved 10 years ago into him understanding that he broke the code. Nitrogen, pear, apple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the NAP.
NAP. Okay. And then the NAP method of orchard planting. And then from the NAP method, and you create the shade, then you can create the biome beneath it, and you create annual herbs and hundreds of other things, and you can proliferate berries and native plants, and you can bring back biomes to regions. This entire valley I live in is where the Pony Express Trail came through in the 1800s. It's the original course. It goes through 23 acres of our property down here, where I have the original track of the Pony Express here that went to California, all the way from the East Coast. And it is the first track to connect the East to the West. We even have a section of road here called Pony Express Trail. But if you get the original account, it's called Columns Report. It's when the military came through here for the first time in 1854. And they describe the biology extensively in like a 12-page dossier that you can still get from USGS. And it explains from the lower level of the floodplain, impenetrable berries of currants and strawberry and this and that. And then at the higher level, we tried to escape. It was a clusterfuck of cherries and higher trees and serviceberry. And none of that is in this valley. It was completely all destroyed. They stole the water. They planted some kind of crappy grain, and it's a desert shithole. But it's not, because 5 years ago, I preserved 8 acres out front. I planted all that stuff back out there, and we created a wetland, cottonwood wetland restoration is what we called it. The state loved it. They came out, they sent people out here. They were like, this is awesome. We could do whatever. We could plant everything here. And I did a little, and they were like, this is amazing. This is going to help. And if you do it all here in this 5 acres and you die, Diamond, it is going to spread out of here into 7 acres, to 12 acres. And then it's going to blow down the wind. And then if they stop stealing water from this river, it's going to blow out the whole valley again. And so in 2050, when the grid's down and the shit hits the fan, this valley will recapitulate, and it will reflower, and it will repopulate with all the dynamic permaculture because of the moisture, because of the fungi returning, and because of all of those things that it needs. If you take a system and just bring it down to 5 species and you reduce all the biome, there's no way to recover, even if you're in a drought scenario. And a lot of these people are living in drought regions. You need to increase the moisture, and you can do that if you're watering just a little bit. And then you need to increase the biology. And what we're suggesting is that if you get involved with this Kickstarter, you don't need to just make compost, because we were all just making compost and we didn't even know what we're doing, right? It's funny. It's like people are like, oh, I got the best. I'm doing the best. I do a triple this and I flip it. Like, dude, it could still not do anything.
Yeah. So this dovetails with what you were saying, though. So when I decided to do a PDC, a permaculture design course, I realized what you said about how one person can't teach you permaculture to be everywhere all at once. And so I gathered over 70 different educators from every single bioregion and all the niche disciplines of permaculture, and created the first holistic team teacher-based course. And it's over 200 hours. So I did that. And that model of holistic thinking, of gathering all the different experts and listening to them, and then boiling it down to the principles of what everyone is talking about that is common to all those niche experts, is what I did to create Regenerative Soil, which is the first book in the trilogy. And then Regenerative Soil Microscopy is the second book in that trilogy. And it's, again, a gathering of disciplines for soil microscopy testing from all these different areas, so that we can have a more holistic understanding of our soil, our compost, our roots. our microbes and our plants themselves. So the sap in the plant, the phloem of the plant, the actual leaf surface, all of these things, they've never been mapped out before. And they are totally valid, and they tell us incredible information. You can see if a plant is going to be open to pests just by looking at the leaf. You can see if a plant is enfortressed and protected by the microbes by just looking at the leaf. We have the ability to diagnose. We have the ability to see what healthy soil is and see what sick soil is, and differentiate very quickly. We can develop this fluency. That's what's so incredible about this space, is it seems so foreign initially. You're like, it just looks like little specks and round things, but then we have this incredible fluency as humans, that we gain this pattern literacy, and it builds and builds, and suddenly you're looking at this and you're like, oh wow, there's no way that this can cycle properly. So all the nutrition's getting locked up in your bacteria and in your fungi. You need protozoas and you need nematodes in order to actually be cycling these nutrients. You need to make some compost and put some papaya in your compost to attract those nematodes, like those kind of simple things you can immediately see and then immediately do, and you can create a change in your soil. But that only came out of me learning from dozens upon dozens of experts one-on-one, and then reading thousands and thousands of published papers, and then ciphering through it, because so much of that stuff is questionable with the way they do it and the way they create their conclusions. And so much of it, when you understand actual soil, you see how silly they are with their conclusions, because they don't understand what living soil actually is. And so they're like blindly, like, for instance, there was someone talking about the fungal to bacterial ratio and how it was screwing up their tomatoes. And it was like, yeah, because you didn't run your testing method through 2 other different ciphers with the microscope, and you didn't do DNA sequencing on your piles. And so they were obviously, it mattered which fungi and it mattered which bacteria in their scenario. And it's that lack of discernment that only comes with fluency of being part of a community, to be able to hold up your example and look at 50 examples of what you think it is and be like, oh, wow, this looks nothing like that.
Yeah.
I'm wrong. What am I doing? Yeah. And that gut check is what community citizen science is all about. And it's going to change everything. We're going to be able to choose. We're going to be able to follow. We're going to be able to connect and make better and better decisions over time. And so sites like yours, Diamond, are going to become oases all over the world that are going to, like you said, expand outward with that better soil, higher moisture content, which again, they've been tricking us with this whole pH nonsense, right? pH is directly correlated to moisture levels. If you look at the humidity and the climates and everything on a map, it's directly related to it. So let's get the moisture levels up. Let's get the organic matter levels up. Let's get our soils dark and beautiful. And the structure is really fine and crumb-like, because that's a crystalline structure that actually is conductive. So when we talk about this geomagnetism and paramagnetism, that seems a little bit like that seems difficult. It's not difficult. It's very easy to test for, and it directly correlates to the structure of the soil, because the structure is the receptivity of the geomagnetic field, because the field's always there. It's just the anchors in the soil are the structure. So all of our worlds are combining.
Yeah, if you didn't know, I'm going to blow your mind again. So we're going to bring a little geology in here. And because you keep talking about geomagnetism, it's not necessarily that terminology, but it might be in soil science. Okay. But when we're talking about the surface or the geomorphology, and I'm looking at a map, like let's say if I go out to Nevada, it's a great area to do geologic mapping because there's no vegetation. So you can see where the bedrock sticks out in basin and range. If I go to central Nevada, there's mountains that stick out, the bedrock sticking out here, and you can easily map that. Then you can map the erosional patterns of the geomorphology. Geomorphology is the recent, let's say, Holocene erosional patterns where we can see lobes and deltas form, and that's what forms our soils. And then we have to wait for hundreds or thousands of years for the soil profile to develop. And And that gives us the topsoil and the subsurface and the regolith, etc. Now, that being said, all right, you're talking about geomagnetism being effective. But what we talk about in geology and what we measure, we've been measuring this since the 1950s, since the equipment was developed. It's called the resistivity. And the resistivity of the soil, like when you say, like in my, when I was in graduate school and I had my comprehensive tests, every professor hated me except two. And they all wanted me gone because I was the only one that didn't have a 4.0 that got a scholarship. And I was a jackass and I wore tank tops. And all the students loved me. And they thought I was just, because I said everything they're talking about is old stuff. And they're all old people and everything else is new. Can you imagine that? And so they were mad at me. And guess what? Everything I told my students is correct today. And everything they were teaching is a little old. So that's just the nature of science. People get offended when you have new ideas or concepts. But the resistivity of soil is the same as saying the bioactivity. And what I mean by that is if you have the correct resistivity in the soil, it's going to be conducive to ionization. Therefore, if you have the microbes in there that can bring up the minerals and the resistivity is correct, which you're calling geomagnetism, but there's literally, the magnetism is measurable at every place, but you have to know what the base bedrock is and what the minerals coming up from the bedrock are for that to make any, for that to matter. And that's why we give it a resistivity measure. So you can measure the general magnetism in the area, but then you have to know what the content of the minerals are. And then I can give it a resistivity of -4. And that means it's really receptive to ions. So we can be taking up minerals there. If it's a resistivity of +2, it's bad. Nothing's happening there. Everything's ionic, everything's taken up, and it's dead. So you want the right resistivity in the subsurface to start with, and you can measure that. Again, it's another test and another piece of equipment. So it's like what we're developing is all of the information we need to make one tool that we can stick into the ground. And we look at it and it gives us resistivity. It gives us soil moisture. It gives us the pH. It gives us bricks. It gives us whatever we want. We just beep, 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 beep. You know, it has 2 or 3 electrodes. And this is literally a device, costs $100 that every farmer can use. They can go boom. And they'll be like, holy crap, honey, we need lime in here. Well, whatever, just the simple fix to know at that moment. You know what I mean? Compost. We need lime. We need sand. We need to stop watering. We got to water, whatever it is. It just comes up on this device. And I feel like we're like a decade away.
Yeah. And so paramagnetism is the weak magnetic force between things that is directly related to the Earth's magnetic field. So that's where paramagnetism comes from. And that's easy with the Callahan meter. Phil Callahan was an incredible scientist, and he has a meter. So we can test for that so easily. I'm going to get one and start using it. So that is something I want to add into this, the database, so that we have all of these things gathered together, because no one's ever done that. And what we're going to find is the best soils, the soils with the ideal resistivity, the soils with the highest organic matter level, which is very easy to test for, the soils that are in the pH ranges that allow for all the nutrients to be unlocked in the ideal zone. All these simple tests, when we put them together, like in a kit, like I have a kit basically that I always use. And so there's like pH, there's a simple NPK, there's redox, there's salinity. I've got all my different stains and all my different methods with the microscope, and then I've got the bionutrient meter and the bricks meter. Putting these together creates a holistic picture of the health of the plant and the soil. And that's never been done in a public way. Like, it's never been done in studies extensively, and it's never been done in a public way that like, there are commercial farmers certainly who are doing this, like approving that organic matter highest levels is connected to nutrient dense food. but they're not doing this across bioregions, and they're not doing all those holistic tests to see what the other effects are. And they like no one's DNA sequencing their compost and soil. I was the first person to DNA sequence EM, for instance. So
how much did that cost?
Well, okay. So that time I burned through almost a whole flow cell. So that cost $900 to a multiplex, 6 different samples. But the reason I did it for almost 24 hours straight is because everyone else was doing their DNA tests for only 2 hours. And at 2 hours, there's no drop. If you're actually doing actual healthy compost, there is no drop in reads. And so I'm like reading all the tests online. I'm like, dude, you cut your experiment in the middle of it to save money. And I'm like, I don't care. I want to actually know the truth. Like, I'm willing to burn through this flow cell. And so I did the full sequence for 23 hours. And when I revealed that to like the company and I revealed that to the community, everyone was like, oh my word, thank you so much, because it's so much information. The biggest amount of reads I've ever seen off of a compost or soil sample was 72,000. Mine had over 850,000 reads. So this is
boom.
They're right. They're not even doing the like hard work. They're not even willing to sacrifice a flow cell to see more. So this is the kind of games that I'm talking about that they're playing. Like I was reading one of these papers, and he's like, oh, and then I did this, and then this drop got on the side, and I used that drop. And I'm like, wait a second, that drop got on the side of the machine? That means that drop is completely contaminated with whatever's on that surface, bro. And he published it, and it was like, and here's my results. And so my conclusion is, and it's like, so this is why we need people with integrity creating like more of this information. And we also need people like you and I to go through and read these things, because there's so much shenanigans going on. And you just go to your local farmers market, see when they're doing tours, and go visit their actual soils. You'll find that half the organic farmers have got it, and they've got great soil. And then half of them are trying to figure it out, and their soil's not as good as yours. And you're like, wait a second, man, I'm working on my soil, but you're not even like working on anything. What are you doing?
Well, I can't agree with you more. Now, do you want me to blow your mind?
Let's do it.
Yeah. The whole green movement is nonsense, because for decades, they've been producing these photovoltaic cells, 20 years in California where they mandated them. And now they revealed today that they have nowhere to put the toxic waste. And that just hit them. And they were like, hey, how come we hadn't thought about this? And then if you just increase what they're planning to happen in the next 30 years, you completely toxify the earth forever for the next 50,000 years. There's nowhere to put them, nowhere to burn them, nowhere to remediate them, and no one's doing it. So that is the number one problem with the whole green movement. Now, this paper that I'm putting up here is something that no one wants to look into. Electricity generated by soil in microbial fuel cells. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So if you have the microbiology in the subsurface, you're creating electricity.
And EM has the microbe in there. I bet you anything. I can't even see it from here. But if you read the microbes in there, like, who's the microbe family?
Oh, you want to know who the microbe family in the paper is?
Yeah.
Soil has been used to generate electrical power in microbial fuel cells for years and exhibited several potential applications. Yeah, how about free energy from the dirt? Now, this study aimed to reveal the effects of soil properties that generated electricity and the diversity of soil source electromagnetic bacteria. Now, 7 soil samples were collected across China, can you believe that? And packed into air cathode NCFs, just like you said, you don't want it contaminated. And then they generated electricity over a 270-day period. The FE.
It's Clostridium. So that is an EM. That microbe, Clostridium, is in EM.
Clostridia, Lactospiraceae, and Planoaceae. Those are the dominant bacteria creating electricity in soils. And it has to do with pH and everything we're talking about. So if you tweak it right, you can be like, have soils going, that's crazy.
You wonder why someone just figures it out one day and their yard is completely different.
It's the reverse. Like
it's microbial.
Decades ago, people put electrodes into a raised bed and they grew plants faster. And they were like, we don't know what's happening. And now it's the reverse engineering of that, right? The plants are electric. So if we give them extra electric and they're in the right mode, then the mycorrhiza is going to be like, oh my God, I could do this quick. It's almost like a crackhead, right? The mycorrhiza is now chucking out nutrients and the plant's going, wow, because it normally doesn't. So the mycorrhiza delegates how fast the plant can grow. It can only grow as fast as it gives it the nutrients. And if you have the perfect dynamics and then you kick it up a notch, then you can electrify a plant and go, wah, and multiply it by 10, which is why I don't think that this magnetic excursion we're going into with increased energy from space is a bad thing. Because in times like this, we've had crazy outputs from plants. So we could be looking at like Terra Earth, where trees get ginormous, they grow up into space, ferns go 300 feet high, and then we create a canopy, and then the biodiversity increases. We have insects, we have 10-foot, bugs like dragonflies.
This is why the database is so critical, because we're actually going to be able to see differences in the microbes as there's solar flares, as there's differences in the magnetism of the earth. All of these changes are going to map in the soil, and there's going to be waves of opportunity, of challenge, but that's a par for the course. That's what nature is going to be always, right? And so us being able to recognize, us being able to map, us being able to respond to those stressors and opportunities, because every stress is actually an opportunity. I mean, especially when it's an abundance of energy. And this is why the biochar, so we can hold excess energy. This is why compost and organic matter, the beam, because that's the fungi. Even if you're doing your own compost, you want to sample different composts that are different types of compost to complement what you're doing. I would always borrow bits of other people's compost in my neighborhood, and like from grandma, literally. And I would combine all the compost in my compost teas. And in months I had soils, I kid you not, that were as deep as my arm to my shoulder, using compost teas constantly. And I'll reveal a secret. I never watered my compost teas down, because compost tea is already watered down and you add compost. So why would you water it down again? Right?
Spreading it thin.
So, yeah. And so I just went all in, and it's that combination. So get some beam compost.
It has, Matt, it has everything to do about why you're doing the Kickstarter. That the science, everything's related. Hello, the science is not settled. All right. No. You talk about in like your most famous videos about Ingram's like hot compost and everyone trying to get the ultimate compost. And then years later, people are like, I got a 23-minute compost. It's amazing. I bake in the oven. And you're like, no, it's not about speed. It's about completeness. And so completeness, and now what we're talking about now, this is a whole new paradigm. Completeness in compost is not what you think. If you're composting in your bioregion and you're composting what you have and your animals and everything, and you're doing a beam system or you do the Johnson Soup bioreactor, that's great. But your compost is not complete. It's not complete. I'm going to tell you why. It's bioregionably complete. And I think Matt would agree with that, but it's not the best it could be. And what Matt did was he hacked the matrix. So literally, that's what we're doing here with this Kickstarter. We're going to hack the matrix. And if you know that there's a bioregion that has hundreds of other things, nematodes or whatever you need, you can go there and grab it and bring it to you. And it would be simple as a single trip and a few bags of soil. That's it. Right, and you can be repurposing food, all the bags you've ever saved to what am I going to do with this 50-pound bag of chicken feed that I've been keeping for years? We have 8,000 of those bags. Maybe I have a whole shipping container filled with recycled bags, which could be bio bags that we're going to build houses with in the future. Anyone knows what that's for. But I can grab a few and get soil from, I could take a trip to Indiana, take a family vacation. I'm not going to waste it on just Disneyland. I'm going to go to the local biodynamic farmer and I'm going to say, hey, can I get 20 pounds of your compost? And he's going to say, of course. Yeah. Maybe he'll say $5 or whatever. And I'll be like, I'll give you 20, give me 3 bags or whatever. But I'm going to take that back and I'm going to spread the love around the world, because what we can do is literally spread this microbiome. And I'm not talking about some sick video, 2 girls in 1 cup. I'm talking about, you don't even know what that reference is.
I don't know.
Oh, everyone else listening does. And it's completely, well, when you find out, you'll vomit in your own mouth. But it has everything to do with poop. Poop is the key. Okay. And we need to spread the poop around the planet, because the microbiome from animals in our guts, the gut bacteria coming from Asians is different than the micro gut bacteria coming from Indians, and the different from Europeans, but each is unique in it's presenting a bacteria that we need to break down the soil in that region for perfect growth. And that's just some of the new ideas that we're just gaining, and people don't.
Yeah, but that goes directly into what we were talking about before, with the fact that like they had sterilized soil, and so they had sterilized plants, and then only when the organic movement started figuring out soil did they suddenly see, and enough people had it figured out, enough people were doing biodynamic composting, enough people doing hot composting, that they saw that the life was there. And that means the obvious ones, the easiest ones were seen and were added. But that means that there's most likely, definitely, all these other microbes that are missing, that are in the wild regions that you're talking about. Korean natural farming, or natural farming as it really should be called, because Master Cho, Korean natural farming.
That's racist.
Hey, well, no, listen, he learned from Japanese farmers.
I'm being completely facetious. Korean natural farming is Korean natural farming. That's where all this comes from. They were the first to use EM. They were the first to do all this, and we should give them credit.
But well, yeah, and Master Cho learned from Japanese farmers, and he combined, just like I do, combined all these different things and then created a new form of farming. So all of these disciplines, though, of gathering that wild IMO, that indigenous microorganisms, and then adding them in and inoculating what we're doing, is so critical. And that process is going to continuously bring in new biology. And we have to preserve these places and respectfully take from them. So taking like a handful of biology from a really rich area. But this is we're going to, through the microscope work, through the DNA sequencing work, which is the 3rd book in the trilogy, that'll come out next year. All of these things, we're going to be able to map this out and find those microbes and then promote them, and then have that like that combination, because you know that people are changing the way they do composting already because of my books. And already because of the new insights with the microscopy, the people that are on my team, they're understanding things in different ways, and people are realizing that we're going to find things. We're going to, I mean, we already figured out recently, vermicompost after hot compost guarantees that if there's any of those E. coli or pathogens that got through, you should cut them off and end that. We only figured that out through testing though. And so there is a whole suite of these things to be figured out still, these caveats, these special rules that become the rule. And it's only can be done by us gathering information together and talking about it and working out and moving together forward with eyes open. And that comes from tests.
Yeah, and that goes with community. And we know one thing, Matt, that you and I are not new. This isn't new. We're not unique. In fact, and I want to end this podcast on this topic. The rainforests in Brazil and the Amazon have been determined to be a utopia of permaculture soils that were clearly developed by humans that knew about all the inputs in these mycorrhiza and bacteria. Because if you're a soil scientist back in the day and you study rainforest soils, you're going to find that they're high in oxalate. They're just terrible. Rainforest soils are the worst. They're nutrient deficient and they're terrible. But in these particular paleosols, and paleosols are ancient soils. I'm a geologist. So when we look, I've found ancient paleosols in the desert Southwest. I found ancient paleosols in the East Coast and the central US, where I get down about 10, 20,000 years, and I expect it to go from topsoil to subsoil to regolith and then bedrock. That's the normal progression. But about 8 feet down, I have another topsoil level. It's desiccated and it's a paleosol. It's been brickified. So it looks like it shrinks. So you normally have a 12-inch topsoil. It shrinks down to about 3 inches and becomes a hard yellow brick. And you know what that is. It's called the paleosol. That's what we learned. We could sample it. We could test it. And it's an ancient subsoil. And that shrunk because it just sat there and there was no moisture. And this is everywhere in the world. So what we're seeing is that ancient cultures, and these paleosols are all around 8,000 years old. So 8,000 years ago, we're making perfect soils everywhere. And the same thing's happening in the rainforest. That's estimated to be that old. And then everyone's dead now and nobody knows why it's there. So it seems like about 8,000 years ago, we had come out of mass extinction at 12.9. It took about 4,000 years. And this is right before at 6,000, between 8 and 6,000, they claim modern farming was developed. But 8,000 years ago, these soils were already there. So the indigenous people were fortifying the soils so that literally they were permaculturalists. They weren't farming. They were tweaking the soil. They were going over to Jimmy's area and bringing some stuff and bringing it here. I'm going to go get the leaves 3 miles away from up in the high forest and bring them down here. I'm going to go get the stuff down by the river and we'll bring it up here. I'm going to go get the poop from his ox area and we'll bring it here. And they were doing that. And they were seeing it get better and they kept doing it. And what they created was perfect soils 8,000 years ago all over the world. And almost nobody's talking about it. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative, because we're chemical farming. But I think it is indicative of where we're headed. The only way to survive on the planet is to be a steward of the soil. And you don't have to build big buildings. You don't have to control populations. But if you build big soils, anything is possible. Final words.
I'm just going to echo with that. Anything is absolutely possible if we fix our soils and have soils that get better and better every year. And that's what regenerative soil is. And that's what the regenerative soil series is all about. And if you want to know what's in your soil, you want to be able to understand your soil, your plants, how to improve your soil, how to diagnose and evaluate your soil, your compost, your roots, your plants, your mycorrhizae, all of it. Join this Kickstarter. We'll have a little bit of time left. I'm so excited. This is the game changer for everyone that grows food and works with soil. This database is going to open up so many doors, so much deeper understanding, and it's going to force, farmers to take it up a notch. They're going to really have to, farm differently. And it's only going to make better and better food. And the winners, the best practices are going to rise to the top. The cream will rise to the top. And so in your bioregion, you're going to be like, oh man, I need this native plant. This is why my compost hasn't been as good as these people. They've been using the oak leaves. Man, for my bioregion, if I don't have oak leaves in my compost, it can't even compete. And it's because there's something on the oak leaves in that area and the tannins. And it's because it's already native to all the soil because the whole area was once oak. For it, right? All those factors get brought in, and we're going to develop best practices that are bioregionalized. When he said, that like you would take years and all these different studies and all these different things to know what's right or to know all the parts of permaculture, with this database, with the transparency, within only a few short years with thousands of people involved, we're going to be able to see with absolute certainty what works best in all the bioregions, independent of everything. So it's just going to be amazing. I can't wait for it to happen. We're at the last day.
Well, Matt, it already happened. It happened 2x. In fact, we're at about 250% now, $61,015 from a $25,000 Kickstarter. Congratulations. There's still room to grow. In fact, we could get this up about 75,000 by a day and a half from now, because a lot of it's happening now. We've already been up $5,000 in the last 24 hours. So that's good news. That means more people are getting the book. The most important news is that people are getting involved in the database, because it doesn't matter about how many books you sell. It matters how many people are actually putting the information in the database and
doing the actions. I mean, that's what it is. It's like the books would be meaningless if people actually didn't do what's in the books, but people are applying it. And
I think you could be a recluse and you can do your own. You could read the book and you could learn what you're seeing yourself, and you can hide in your own bubble, but then you would still be an a-hole because you're not helping us, you know? So, and just like he said in the beginning, he's got one student that's in Australia that she's completely off the chains. And she's like, I'm going to go. And that's great. Look, you can go. If you're taking a family trip or going somewhere, you can grab a small baggie of the sample. If you don't have the microscope or the wherewithal, and you know me or Matt or someone, oh, come on. If you watch the channel, bag it and send it to me. Put the place, the date, the spot, everything. We need all of that data. We need the physical location, longitude, and latitude, the farm, and how you sampled it, what level. All that information is going to be critical to develop this database, because this is real science. It's observational science. It's just like the old science. We all observe stuff. We put all the database together and we say, hey, Jimmy over here, he put the chicken poop in then and did this. And look what he got. And everyone's like, oh my God, what is it, just his poop? And then they say, and then they're smart at this point, because now we're scientists. And you're like, Jimmy, what are you feeding the chickens? That's the first thing. So we got to go to the base, you know, and then we can get the whole loop. And now we know why Jimmy's poop is perfect, because Jimmy's chickens don't eat the feed that comes from the presser. Jimmy free ranges. And then we go look at his farm. We're like, oh, they're eating only this plant. And that's why this is a taproot plant that's taking deep nutrients from the earth. And the plant, and the eggs are amazing. The poop's even better. And the microbes are perfect. He's got the perfect biodynamic system. And guess what the perfect biodynamic system is? The one that's running in the forest, the one that's never been defeated, that's been ongoing forever. And we have not been able to replicate it, no matter how hard we do, how many billions of dollars we dump into the ground. We continue to toxify our soils, deplete the nutrition density of our foods. We're literally killing humanity on the farming practices we've been using since the early century. And this has got to end. And I just proved at the beginning of the video that the organic model is not the answer. The organic certification is bypassed by people lying. So, I mean, you could say organic, but I don't know if you actually looked into what certified organic means. That they can certifiably spray 27 chemicals on your shit, including fungicides, herbicides, and pesticides on all your food that are certified organic. And like, I don't spray anything. Sometimes I pee on food, but I'm usually not on the food. It's on the ground below it. And we encourage that. And we should be encouraging natural biodynamic farming moving forward, because I'm going to be honest. If the powers that be are trying to reduce the population by great numbers, we don't need that many biodynamic farms to feed the people that are left. We don't. We have the capacity right now to do it. We now have the capacity and knowledge to feed everyone on earth biodynamically, but we won't, because we're not in the paradigm yet. But even after the shift, if there are enough people worldwide knowledgeable about this information, We will be able to share it with people. Now, this isn't new. It's like, no, we're not doing anything new. We're just rehashing stuff that's hundreds of years old, maybe goes back thousands of years, and could be all the way back pre-Diluvian. If Atlantis,
we're trying to figure out what was originally here inside plants, because what we did was we killed the soil, which was the mother for all plants. Yeah. And then we sterilized the plants and the seeds, and then they created GMO seeds. And we've come so far from what was actually natural for humans to eat and humans to, I mean, even sleep. We used to have we had bimodal sleep patterns. All humans did. In the midnight hour, we'd wake up for an hour and then go back to bed. And they broke us of that in the 1800s when they created the, it depends on where you were, but mostly in the 1800s when the electric light became affordable and everywhere. They've manufactured what we think is human. And so what we need to do is, do the things that we know, make us feel more human and enhance our health, our immunological functioning, the clarity of our minds, and also our connection to the earth. Because the more we are connected to the earth, the more that we are able to observe with pure observation and without any filters between it, ourselves and nature, the closer we are to who we once were as people. And the more natural that food is, the healthier it is. And so what we figured out is that we're continuously in this process of rediscovery, but there also are things that I would hazard to say are new. And though, the Albrecht method, they were able to grow things that usually take months in weeks. And they theorized that it could take they could grow things that usually take months and days if they were able to do what they theoretically thought with organic, but they hadn't developed soils well enough. They didn't understand the soil science, but now we have the full soil science. So the mineral coherence is combining with the biology, and we're seeing the actual time periods for growth speed up. And I've seen it myself. That's what happened with that Peruvian corn, that speckled corn that was made, that was impossible to grow in America. I was able to do that. And it's all through triggering these microbial reactions inside the plant through healthy soil and compost. And this is why some lawns don't get frost on them. This is why in the middle of the Amazon, the soil is black and rich. All of these circle, and the reason that our ancestors survived, and the reason that our ancestors were able to live in large numbers, but not have the diseases and all the problems that we see in cities, and especially like in the European cities around the Black Plague era. It's like we were able to avoid all that because of the simple practices that were, I would argue, largely instinctual, because we had the microbiomes that were our second brain, that were the microbes in the plants too. So the microbes in our guts that were our second brain are in the soil and in the plants, and people do our things instinctually. But meanwhile, the microbes are stimulating us and stimulating our moods and inspiring everything and regulating everything all the way through. This is why personality is so linked to probiotics and good food. And as we uncover this and connect this more, we are going to change all of food, and that's going to change all of health. And the sky's the limit. And they're not telling us. I mean, people are doing this behind private. I talked to someone who's in Denmark with an AI that is literally stripping through all the databases for all the microbiological information, and they're mapping it all out using this AI privately. And I'm like, what are you planning on doing with all the information? Shouldn't you share it? And they stop talking to me. But that's the thing, is they are all doing this smash and grab with all of our information and our futures and our health and our kids' health.
So this came out. Now look, this came out about 3 years ago when we had some inside.
Show me, I can't see it.
No, I don't have anything to share with you. But this information I'm about to share came out about 3 years ago. And what we had been told, and this is from my insiders. So I helped start the March Against Monsanto worldwide. We had 27,000 cities worldwide marching with hundreds of millions of people. And no one reported on it, right? And so what we found out at the same time was after I had trickled down, I had surgeons contact me about laparoscopies they'd done from Diet Coke people and gallstones. And they were saying that the industry, the food industry, is preventing them from providing information from the medical industry to tell people that it's the food they're eating that's killing them. Because every single person they took out a failed gallbladder from was drinking Diet Coke. Every single person, or a diet beverage, 6 a day. So like once 90% of all your patients after 15 years present themselves to you with a gallstone or a gall infection that you have to remove, and you're not allowed to share the gallstone to a scientist to do, you're not allowed to look at it after the fact. It's proprietary information because the industry has placed preemptive laws in place to prevent you from doing the medical science to prove that the agricultural industry is responsible for this thing. And that's why diabetes is king in America. If you look at every American graph, America is the lowest life expectancy with the shittiest diet, and it's on purpose. It's because we have these preemptive laws. When I started the March Against Monsanto in Philadelphia, I went and researched Dow and Bayer and Monsanto, but I figured that they had placed preemptive laws in Philadelphia in 1992. 1992 laws were passed to prevent of the planting of genetically modified corn in Pennsylvania. And all plants, any genetically modified crop was prevented from litigation in 92. Now, not a single genetically modified crop existed until 94. So a law 2 years prior in Philadelphia was in place to prevent something that apparently didn't exist. Now that's impossible based in reality. But when you get to that level of knowledge, that pisses you off because you know what's going on. These multinational corporations have a chokehold on governments. They go around, they were able to pass that law in 26 states 2 years before the first GMO was ever shown to the public because they already had it. They were already testing on it. They had it in 1987. So it took 5 years for the preemptive laws, and then 2 years for the release of the first plant. So for 7 years, they knew they had it. Now, if you look at the 7 years they had it, the biocorp that had the gene had a genome from a corn plant that was spliced with another gene that made humans infertile. That was the first GMO. And what they had made it for was to feed the human population corn chips or masa or any corn that made the population infertile.
Yeah.
And that was part of the first depopulation protocols. That was bought up by Monsanto and became the first GMO. Now, when they went 7 years later to the EPA and the FDA to get approval, they gave them all their paperwork. And the way it works is, and I know you know this, is that the corporation proves that it's safe, which is completely antithetical. So they said, here's all our scientists. We have 7 years of research. It's safe. But what if you do an intrinsic analysis of all the paperwork that came out at that time, not one of them mentioned the fact that the biotechnology that they bought was one to create infertility in humans. It was only said to be a biotechnology that added the glyphosate resistance to the corn, not the part about human infertility. And it passed. So the question has been from the beginning, is the first GMO product, plant, a corn, it was a corn, is the first GMO corn an infertility project? And did they ever remove that gene? Because it's not in the literature, but it's in the initial literature on the genome that was sold to Monsanto, which is now Bayer Monsanto. But Monsanto bought the patent for the genetically modified organism that was corn that made humans infertile. So the first GMO was a corn that made you infertile if you ate it. They bought it, they patented it, and now then they genetically modified corn. But there's no evidence they ever removed the infertility part. None. So what that means is that everyone for 2 decades has been eating the infertility gene. And in 2 decades, that this is proven. You can look at the fertility of humanity and it's going straight down. Now, this is what we're really fighting against. I'm fighting for the health of my family and my friends, but I'm fighting against the destruction of humans.
And so many of my students that are jumping into this community already have microscopes are nurses, and they're all looking at their blood. They're all wanting me to start looking at my blood, and it's because they don't trust the blood test results they're getting from the regular doctors, and they're nurses. So we're at we're in a time frame where it's very clear that we're being lied to straight up about fundamentals, and everyone kind of knows, like the nurses know, you know, that a lot of the farmers know too. A lot of farmers are held hostage financially. There's a lot of there's that example, that guy who had GMOs come onto his property and they just sued him and just sued him out of business and out of his land, and then they just buy up the land. So we have to fight back. I mean, this is the time.
And a lot of farmers in our region are still dumb as trees. We have a lot of woke people here, which I don't support. And we have a lot of conservative people that are awakened to the problems of food production. So they're actually growing food organically. Yeah. So like the conservative people are growing food. Then the other group are complaining about the policies. Now, here's a weird thing. We just developed this food security nonprofit here that seems great. It's called like the food security, whatever, of this region. And so, but they're totally woke. And so I was like, no, I'll give them a chance. So I went to this thing and we're all exchanging ideas, and they bring up all the food heroes of the Four Corners region. And the food heroes are great. They're like a lot of organic biodynamic farmers and local farmers. Okay. And we are doing the best, like including myself, but I'm not definitely showcased there. Would never be showcased in any newspaper here, because I was blackballed 5 years ago when they realized I didn't believe in global warming, that I was a scientist that believed in natural climate cycles and not man-induced climate. So they blackballed me right from the rip. This is after I was volunteering 50 hours a week on the grow domes in town. I was doing free dry sit masonry, construction consulting, literally thousands of dollars worth of volunteer work. And they just said, they pulled me to the side and they were like, Diamond, can you not talk about that stuff on your channel? And I looked at them and I said, who the fuck do you think you are? No, you can all suck it and I'll never come back here again. So goodbye. And so they just left. The people that are against what we're talking about will literally shoot themselves in the foot to be right before they feed their neighbor. That's the sickness that we're dealing with. It's a sickness.
Yeah. And that's why community is the way we start fixing things. We start seeing people like what you did. You reached out and you were community, and you were like willing to just see them as people and work with them. But then they said, hey, I judge you. You're like, excuse me.
You said that thing? I was like, yeah, why? What does that have to do with us growing tomatoes in this dome? And they're like, oh, you can't say that thing. And I was like, well that thing has nothing to do with your progress here.
They just wanted the narrative of control to roll forward unimpeded. They just wanted you to just say, here, just put them on.
Yeah, well,
I mean, like, that's where we're at now. I mean, Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and be happy.
No, you know what I mean? What's clear is that
British Petroleum made the carbon footprint concept so that they could BP, British Petroleum, created it as part of a PR scheme in 2004 or 2001 to actually shift the focus. And they spend more on actual commercials to spread the word on it than actually doing anything like that they talk about.
Well, look, if you're making $8 billion in profit and you're like, look, we'll take $1 billion of it and we'll just do this bullshit PR program on footprints, whatever they want. What do they want? Carbon shift. Oh yeah, we'll just do that. Give them $1 billion of commercials. They'll love us.
This is the thing, is there really are cars that can go very efficient. They were created in the 70s. There were tons of these experiments that you could have hyper efficient vehicles. You could burn cleanly. You can use biofuels of all sort, algae fuels, and you can even cleanly burn all the petrochemicals as well. Like, they've proven all these things out, and every single patent that came up, whether it was the water carburetor or the 1,000 miles upon 1 gallon of gas, boom, boom, all those patents were eaten up, and some of those people even were made to disappear or mysteriously like Epstein. Like, there literally is so much science that we could actually leverage to make clean burning technology. I mean, even the thorium mini nukes that like child prodigy came up with, that actually
those aren't real.
Like there's so many possibilities.
Look, in 1989, my father shared with me information, because he had above top secret. He had specially compartmented information, SPI. He told me that the federal government, including the CIA, knew about a plan in the 80s they were developing for a frictionless highway. Be no accidents ever. The problem was that it destroyed the insurance market, which would literally bankrupt the earth. So they could not go forward with that. They killed all the people involved. They shut them all up and threatened to kill their families, because we could have a frictionless electromagnetic highway system where you pull onto a ramp, it sucks your car up, you go 200 miles an hour to your destination without any fuel. You never can get in an accident because there's magnets between you and other vehicles. You get off your stop and then you turn it back on, you drive yourself wherever in the rural road. This was available as before 1990. It was shut down because it would literally bankrupt America. Now, here we are. They are bankrupting America. And guess what? Not for progress. We don't get any levitating cars. We don't get any free fuel. We get $8 a gallon gas. We all get to starve to death, and we're all going to die in misery. That is the world we are now. Listen to this. 40 years after we had no accident highways. So the people running the world, and it's not the elected officials. The elected officials are puppets beneath whoever's above, the Klaus Schwabs and the secret government, the dark energies, the aliens, but it's the deep state. The deep state's been running the show for decades. I mean, they shot Kennedy. The CIA shot Martin Luther King, and ding dang, this is a long time ago. This is the emplacing all the necessary parts to get to where we are today, where they're going to try to bleed us dry, where we don't own anything. But guess what? We own the earth. These are the inalienable rights that our forefathers in the Constitution wrote down. And a stupid congresswoman from Hawaii, I don't know her name, she's so fucking stupid, I would never repeat it, testified before Congress 48 hours ago that the white-haired racist founders of America, we don't know what they actually meant when they wrote these documents. And I'm thinking, when she said that, did she read them? Because it's pretty clear what the documents say. And so that's the problem with America. They have not read the founding documents. They don't know the Bill of Rights. They don't know the Constitution. And it says quite clearly, I remember how proud I was, 11 years old. I could recite every word of the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the first 12 articles of the Constitution. Wow. I mean, I knew this by heart, and I would spill it out anytime. And sometimes I would just go off on Abraham Lincoln's 77 years ago. Our fathers brought forth a new continent, conceived of liberty and justice, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And I mean, this filled my heart with joy as a child because I knew where I lived was built on these founding principles. And I thought they were great. And when I grew up, I was disillusioned because by the time I was 25, I was like, our Constitution is shite. We are not following it. There is censorship. There's rules. There's bullshit. I can't go pee in the woods. I can't go camp where I want to. I can't go do anything I want to. So that's the reality of where we are, right?
Yeah. Well, George Washington was afraid that America would fall due to loss of soil.
Wow. He's a smart man.
Yeah. Yeah, and Thomas Jefferson also was concerned about this because of the way that farming was being done. They're plowing all the soil off their farms into the waterways, and that was the main reason that they felt so compelled to move westward. And George Washington, and same thing with Plato, even, and Aristotle, they were all concerned about the soil. And so the health of the farms in your region, the health of the food, the health of the economy, and the stability and resilience of every single bioregion relies upon the soil. And it's something that smart people have known forever. And it's something that all of our ancestors lived and died by because they understood it was what carried the future forward. And regenerative soil microscopy is all about helping us get in tune with what our soil needs and how to serve those needs. And the Kickstarter is only going for a little while longer. It's about 30 hours left. You can join us and you can be part of the database. You can get the book. You can get the full course. There's an introductory course as well. Everyone can get involved. It doesn't matter your level of understanding currently because we take you from zero all the way up to being able to be certified in this, to be able to be a consultant in this.
Dude, you could go from zero to the top expert in the world based on what we're doing. I mean, literally, like the girl, that woman in Australia that's taking those soil samples, you can do the same thing. And I forgot to reiterate that. If you're going out on a trip, collect bags of soil if you're getting involved. I mean, you don't have to have a microscope now. You don't have to study it now, mail it to Matteri. We'll look at it. I mean, how happy would you be to get 100 samples over the next year from all over? And you're doing, you spend a few hours and you do the test. I mean, that is going to benefit everyone in the end. And then when DNA comes out next year, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that's all. I'm going to be using the DNA sequencer on all the tests and all the samples I get. And I'm going to be able to provide you especially like let's say you did all the microscope work, you did all these other tests and you're like, man, I really wish I had that final component. Send it to me and I'll do that. And that'll help me with my book and my research as it also helps you with your understanding. And that's what's really so cool about this is at a community level, it's just like with the fungi where there's this exponential benefit. Everyone starts helping everyone and it creates this effect and the best practices rise to the top. We get better food, we get better soil, holds more moisture, it changes the pH naturally. We have the natural habitats return, the canopies get taller, we have more shade, the local area transforms, the communities transform, the complainers are silenced.
Now, look, I haven't even delved into any of this. We haven't gone to the next level. We're just starting, and you are too. But just in the haphazard permaculture work we've been doing and building on for 6 years, 7 years here, I now have toads. Toads do not live in the desert. Toads. They live in certain areas on the river. The river's a half a mile from here. There are toads up in my orchard. There are toads in my backyard. There used to be one 4 years ago that I found. Now, giant toads are everywhere. And so, a new bird species and giant salamanders, the largest endangered species of salamander on the planet, used to only live in ponds in the desert here. The giant salamander lives in the woodland of our permaculture orchard. He does it. There's no water. There's no pond. The closest water where the salamander can get is a half a mile to the river. But he's in our orchard because he's big. He's lived here the whole time. He got here. He stayed here, and it is perfect. It has everything he needs. And if there's one 8-inch tiger salamander in my orchard, there's 1,000. And I did the research. I looked it up. So I'm like mind blown. How are there 1,000 salamanders in an orchard in a zone 5 desert in the high alpine region? Well, my soils are good. I've done everything. I've chopped and dropped. I've done everything I need to do. I plant, I rotate, right? I plant legumes. I fix nitrogen and cannabis. We grow everywhere. So that's the best nitrogen fixer. And we rotate that around. We do legumes, then we do cannabis on the legume to get maximum cannabis yield, but then it doubles the nitrogen fixation. People don't get it. They think that these crops are bad and evil. And they've like fava bean, no one can eat it, lectins, cook it 3 times. And then the cannabis, you can eat cannabis raw. You can cook it. You can make medicine. You can make butter.
The seeds from cannabis are the most bioavailable form of protein on earth. Yeah. Humans are literally designed to eat the seeds of cannabis.
Yeah, Leah and I eat probably 1 pound of hemp hearts every month because I have a subscription to a local farm. And it's cheaper. Like if you buy a pound of hemp hearts organic in the store, it's like $20. But if I get 50 pounds shipped, it's $50 in glass jars, no spray, organic. 50 pounds of hemp hearts is enough to live for 6 months. If you're dying in a survival situation, I mean, that is a complete protein, omega fatty 3s. It's so nutrient dense. And then if you're just eating grass and stuff, you're golden.
I want to order one too. You could cook me with that later.
Yeah. Well, that's because they've been growing hemp here for the longest, and it's the cheapest in the world. Yeah. I mean, the first legal hemp farms were in the San Luis Valley, and then Running Horse bottled the first hemp. They were shipping it by hand in a quart container with a hand pressed tied note for $8 a jar. That's like $20 in the store right now.
And my friend Joy Beckerman represented Nativa and Dr. Bronner's and made it possible for hemp to be grown in the United States.
Yeah.
So I love Joy. She's amazing.
The problem with growing hemp in the United States is you have to sign your life off to the feds and they access your property. So almost nobody does it. So it's so reclusive that you might as well just grow pot because it's the same thing and it's 10 times the profit. Yeah. So what they did was they created a law to make no one want to grow hemp. Because if you only grow hemp, you're excluded from growing cannabis in a legal state. So it's weird. They exclude the farmer that's an expert in growing cannabis from growing cannabis. If you want to just grow the low end hemp, you can't grow cannabis. It's against federal law. I mean,
she didn't make the law. She appealed all the laws and then made it so that they would allow it to be.
So we have a long way to go until they streamline that and split it. Hemp is not cannabis. Cannabis is another species. Trust me.
It's crazy. It's totally crazy. But that's what we're doing here is making more sense of the world. We're getting all the crazy.
That would be the same as saying humans that have IQ below 80 are the only humans. And everyone else we got to call. They're illegal. That's the same thing as legalizing hemp and separating
all the high value foods, all high value soils, and we can bring them back. We know how to do it. We have the science. There are new test methods. There are new ways that we can streamline all these things. And there is a new pathway for citizen science to move forward. So I hope that everyone clicks the link and joins us. I'll post the link again. It's there in the chat. Check that out. Thank you all for being here. We are at a cusp moment in history we've got like our hands almost around the ball. You know, we are so close to figuring so many things out. It's just going to take us working together. It's just going to take us showing our work and taking it upon ourselves to do that work. Much like you, Diamond. I mean, the fact that you're out here providing information, providing scientific insight so that people can discern, so that people can disenthrall themselves from the fog of confusion and the toxic inundation that they're trying to feed them. So
yeah, and a lot of my supporters are followers from the March Against Monsanto times. So it's like a decadal faction, right? We have people from 10 years ago coming in. I literally supported Barack Obama back then, you know, like that. And so to see the shift in thinking and the fact that people are willing to continue to follow me, even though I completely went from like super liberal to like gun-toting guy in Colorado, is amazing, because nothing has changed about me at all. What's changed is that once I retired from what I was doing, because once you're in that city environment, you know, and you're working, you're stuck in the cog, and you only have so much time to come home and spend time and sleep and do all that stuff. You don't have time to really think. So once I decided I need time to think, that was 12 years ago. I stopped. It'll be 12 years ago. It's 12 years May, so it's going on 13 years. Mm. That a few years after that, I was like, look, I got to do my own thing. And it took about 8 years after that till I realized that what's going on in the world is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And the same people that are claiming sustainability are the ones that created the unsustainable environment.
I know. It's so insane. And if we just go back to nature, if we start just connecting the cycles again, we're going to see nature rebound. And we're already seeing it. I mean, every permaculture farm I know that gets past that 3-year marker starts having endangered species show up. And they're like, man, if they're that endangered, what happens if we just put permaculture stuff everywhere? It's just not going to be endangered any longer.
No, because they're like, oh my God, this is what I wanted. Boom. It's the perfect pH where I can hibernate. It's the perfect this where I can blossom. It has the perfect insects, because what we're creating is the biodynamic region that once existed without human influence. So now we have the technology. You and I, we're literally like, we are, you know how they have those videos from 50 years ago where we terraform a planet? We are terraforming Earth. And people don't even, they're like, you guys are idiots. The Earth is covered with stuff. We've got sequoias. I mean, but they don't understand the Earth. Now, geologically speaking, for the last 40 million years, the Earth's soil has been depleted down through the Ice Age to where we are now. It's called the desertification and the dustification of Earth. We have been depleted for 40 million years. So anyone, even in the Amazon, where they were capable of creating that soil, they're geniuses. We are at a point in time that is not conducive to life. We need to get CO2 above 2,000 ppm, where it was like halfway to the Carboniferous, where we can sustain, complete rainforests around the planet.
It's so frustrating though, because the fact is, if you have those rainforests in place, then you actually would have less CO2 present at certain times in the atmosphere, and you'd have more CO2 cycling. So it's such a boondoggle way of talking about it. Be like, we need this number, when it's like, oh, well, it's a system.
Well, no, actually, it's a simple system. And think of it this way. If you increase the rainforests and you're depleting the soils, you push the atmosphere way out. So you increase this oxygen. And the atmosphere back in the Carboniferous was 3 times thicker. So once you thicken the atmosphere that thick, then all the questions about the dinosaurs and these giant pterodons flying makes sense, because atmospheric pressure at the surface would be 3x, 3 times now. So that means if I were to jump in the Carboniferous now, I could jump 62 feet instead of 22 feet. That was the largest jump I ever did in high school.
Superman.
I did a 22-foot long jump. So if I was alive with the atmosphere 3 times as thick at the surface, I could easily jump 60 feet. So I would need little help to flap. I could probably put on fake wings and get off the ground and actually fly if I was wearing a suit. This is not in the scientific literature. There are papers on the thickness of the atmosphere. There are papers on the increased CO2. There are some people postulating about what I just said, but they're called conspiracy theorists. But there are hundreds of papers on the fact that the dinosaur could not live on Earth because the blood can't reach his heart. So how come you cannot accept what I just said? Because I know that the atmosphere was 3 times thicker in the Carboniferous based on the proxy data. Why won't you accept that? And then all your problems go away. Dinosaurs can exist, 6-foot dragonflies can fly, and 22-foot pterodons can move through the heavens. But we're not there yet. People are stupid. I mean, that is the only thing I can think of. Only critically thinking people, which is considered to be 15% of the population, are able to have a conversation with us. And that means that if you're not in that 15% and you're listening to Matt and I, you don't know what we're talking about. But I think that the majority of people listening are in that 15%, which shows you that we still have 85% of the population to get to. Now, how do we get there?
By exposing what really works and showing how that relates to living soil and how that translates to simple actions like composting the right way. So if we can just show then we're 2.5 hours in, folks. Thank you for being here with us.
Boom.
Boom. But if we can just show the connection between living soil, the microbiology on the plants, and the healthiest plants, we can actually map out that future that we've talked about. We have the tools, we have the measurements, but the caveats, the conditions, those are going to emerge from the local climate, the local bioregion. And that's why we need people working with microscopes everywhere in every bioregion. We need people making compost, diagnosing compost, and evaluating it everywhere, all over the world. So join us in regenerative soil microscopy.
Yeah, and you thought that the compost explosion was, 10 years ago. I think this is a whole new realm. And God bless Ingram and all the compost maniacs, even the speedy maniacs. But and then even Johnson Sioux Bioreactor, we love you. But what we know about the Johnson Sioux is that depending on your bioregion, you're going to get different beam results. Yes. So we need to catalog this. We need everyone to get involved, because as soon as we do this, that's as soon as we feed the whole world with nutrient-dense foods that are not sprayed, that are not contaminated by $76 million worth of lies, and that we are actually in control of our future. And that's coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So join us on the Kickstarter. And thank you for all joining us tonight. This was awesome.
Holy crap. The only live stream I've ever done, other than on Yard, this is the first live stream we've done on StreamYard, which means we're both clear. I've done some live streams on YouTube itself, but almost everything is pre-recorded. So this has been a great test of the live stream capability. And Matt, you are a genius, and we appreciate you for what you do. $61,035, 228 backers, 32 hours to go. What are you waiting for?
Join us.